And it's Trey and...
All right. Well, welcome everyone here at the Bear Tent at the Farm Progress Show. We're coming to you live here on Facebook and also here in the tent, so we're really excited to be here. Yesterday was an interesting day, wasn't it? They closed the Farm Progress Show down due to some weather, so we had that announcement, and unfortunately we had a panel in the afternoon, so that's why we're here on Facebook Live this morning. It's my pleasure to have a couple of farmers with me that are just exceptional farmers, and the thing that I'm so excited about is we're going to talk about sustainability and the ROI for you farmers out there. So first of all, my name is Whiskey Acres, and Trey Hill, you're from Maryland, over by Chesapeake Bay. Whiskey Acres, I don't think I need to say much about that name because they have a distillery on their farm which is very unique. We're going to hear more about that, how they really grow it from in the ground all the way to in the bottle. So we're going to talk about that. But what's more important, both of you use some solar panels. We're going to get into that later on. But first of all, I'd just like to tell a little bit more about your operation. Trey Hill, a fourth-generation farmer, and actually you're the first North American Bear Forward farmer. So what an honor. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so let's just tell me a little bit about your farm. Make sure that you hold your mic up way close to your mouth so we can hear. There you go.
Yeah, my name's Trey Hill. My farm in Maryland with my father. We're right on the Chesapeake Bay, so we're in an area that's very environmentally sensitive, both socially and in terms of the environment. So we're a rather large-scale corn, wheat, soybean grower, and we have a very strong focus on sustainability, whether it's installing best management practices through nutrient management, and then to kind of what we've converted to now, which is more of like an ecological system of farming where we cover crop and then actually we don't terminate the cover crops until we plant the bulk of our acres of corn and soybeans. So the field, the goal is to kind of have living roots in the fields all year long if we can, or as much of the year as we can.
All right, thanks Trey. We appreciate you being here and adjusting your schedule for this morning's Facebook Live. Of course, we just talked about Jamie with Whiskey Acres, DeKalb, Illinois. So I hear that you use a lot of, like I said, the solar panel in your distillery. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how that whole thing works, and a little bit about your farm?
Sure. Good morning. Whiskey Acres is a unique business in that we're a vertically integrated system. So it's a family farm. We grow a couple thousand acres of corn and soybeans primarily, a little wheat, rye, and barley. And a portion of that crop is used to make premium craft beverage spirits. So bourbon, rye whiskey, vodka, etc., mostly for the Illinois, Chicago markets today. We make about 100,000 bottles a year. Sustainability has always been a big part of our farming operation. It's a fifth-generation farm. We've always taken that very seriously. We were initial enrollees in the Conservation Stewardship Program, but today it takes on an added importance to us, both from a perception as well as a marketing aspect, having a branded product that's very important to consumers. So we've been on a sustainability kick, we call it here, for the last year and a half, and as part of that, we discovered that solar was very important to our consumers, renewable energy in general, and so we embarked upon a plan to take the farm and the distillery to a 100% solar-powered system on an annualized basis. That system just went live in June, and so far is performing excellent.
Well, that's really interesting. You know, I want to get in, as I said, today we're going to talk about the ROI, the return on investment for sustainability practices that you both do on your farm. So I guess one of my first questions is going to be, what has the most financial ROI on your farm, and what was the fastest? But I'm not sure that goes together. Trey, let's start with you.
Well, I'd agree with Jamie on the solar. We converted to solar probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and then actually put a second system in to make it larger to accommodate all of our power needs. So that one was fairly, it was not easy to calculate, but it was something that we could calculate. We could go to our accountant and say, what's it look like? What's the return on investment? It was pretty easy to see. In terms of the cover crops and the trying to do the soil conservation and no-till, that's a much more difficult one. One of our biggest challenges is our labor pool and trying to find really good people that are dedicated to working for us. So we've had to raise our wages in order to get more people. So one of our objectives has been to how do we lower the amount of labor needed to farm. So that's always a challenge for us. This way we can pay more, hire less people, and with the no-till that enables that moves the workload around. We probably spray a little more, but we don't have that big tillage push in the spring. So that's been a real nice benefit to it. And with the cover crops, I don't think it's always a short-term benefit. I think our yields are holding equal. I don't know that we're surpassing yields by cover cropping. I don't know that our yields are growing significantly year by year compared to a conventional farmer. But I think that the long-term gains in terms of organic matter, soil health, and building up the soils for the next following year. So it's both a short-term benefit, but what I'm trying to look at, probably more of the ideal of it is probably looking more at the long-term benefit, so that in 5 years, the farms that we've been doing this system, and we've got some that have been 5 to 7 years with 20 years of no-till, the soils have definitely improved, and we're definitely growing better yields on those farms than we would have had we not done that.
You know, now you and I have talked a little bit about your farm. I know that you do a lot of precision irrigation there, and what's a fascinating story for me was you actually work right together with environmentalists to help them fund your irrigation. Tell me all about that.
Yeah, one thing that's somewhat unique, it's not that novel of an idea, but we have a lot of environmental groups where I live. Every river has a river keeper, and what we've just kind of learned over the last 20 years is that we're much better off working together. Rather than having the animosity between the river keeper and the farmer, the river keepers, I'm not sure who initiated it, whether it was the farmers or the river keepers, but we kind of, as two groups, have decided to work together. And what that's allowed us to do is kind of go, and as we look at the problems that exist in the waterways, is try to figure out what part of it is the farmer's responsibility, what's an acceptable level, and then how can we improve the way we farm, sometimes by looking at it with both groups combined. One good example would be in variable rate nitrogen. One of the objectives was the environmental groups and kind of that side always wanted us to use less nitrogen, and the farmer said, well, we need that much nitrogen to grow corn. It's sound science behind it, and you have to put on so much nitrogen in order to grow a crop of corn in order for farms to be profitable. I need to stay in business. And they said, well, as this technology's emerging, maybe variable rate is a good thing, but maybe it's not. So they've said, well, this was 5 or 6 years ago before some of the bigger companies have had the software packages, and one of the things was boom sensors, whether it was ag leaders or green seekers. They said this is a really sound science. A lot of the farmers didn't agree. I wasn't super optimistic about it. So the riverkeeper said, well, if we can get funding to get 5 sets of sensors for booms, would you be willing to put one on your sprayer and try it? And it really was, you couldn't say no at that point. You could have said no, but why would you? So it was a really good technology. They said, but at the end, we want to be able to analyze the data that comes off of it so that we can see if you had a return on investment, so that way if the 5 of you are successful, either we can get more or hopefully you can come out and help us get other farmers to implement the same technology out of pocket because we can prove that it pays through the data. So that was kind of one of our big ones. They also help us with, a lot of times, one of the impediments to best management practices for farmers is the amount of paperwork. Just going in and finding the resources, going to soil conservation, getting the stuff done, getting the contractors. So what they've done is help facilitate some of these bigger jobs on farms where farmers have, big drainage areas and big swales, and either putting in water, small wetland projects, tiered pools, things like that. The only condition is they want to be able to monitor the outflows, the inflows and outflows, to monitor what's been done. And it's been a really nice collaboration. I'm currently on the board of Shore Rivers, which is our local river keeper. There's another farmer on it. I'm on the board of the Center for Agroecology, which is another group that tries to merge both farmers and environmental groups together to come up with solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is a lot as far as all the things that you have accomplished working with others. Jamie, I want to turn to you right now, and let's talk about how did you determine, he had people that were saying, well, we're going to go ahead and pay for it, and then we'll see if it was worth your investment, basically is what we said. Correct, obviously, yes. You thought it was. Mm-hmm. Yours is a little bit different situation. You realized it was something you not only wanted to do, but it was what your customers wanted too, so a little bit different impetus for implementing it. So what was the easiest thing that you started, or how did you determine what was worth investing in?
Well, solar was an easy one for us, and every state has different incentive programs. There's national and federal and state programs, and for us, the payback on a solar system was about 3.5 to 4 years. So that's pretty easy. In agriculture, there's not too many things that pay off that quickly, and it was just simply a numbers analysis of the programs and how quickly they'd pay. But that being said, for a lot of farms, there's many other things you can do. And for most farmers, it's a series of maybe trials and to see what might work and what doesn't. For us, and an easy one for a lot of farms to implement that probably has even a faster ROI is integrated pest management. You know, the idea that you can go out and scout your fields, take a look at things, make a determination about whether or not you need to make a treatment based on pressures is a very quick return on investment. Obviously, if you don't spray, that money stays in your pocket. If you do have a problem and you go out and spray, you can get usually a yield bump out of that. So that's a very quick return. Something that we implemented an IPM system many years ago, and just go look at your field, scout.
Yeah. So that kind of comes back to my last question for the day. So, do they start small and then build? I know you're big on cover crops. We started some of that in Illinois, not as much as some other places. But so where do they start? And what's your big takeaway advice for them if they're really wanting to be more sustainable, and especially in these tight times for the ROI that they're going to give them? Trey, let's start with you.
For me, the big game changer was we were doing cover crops, and then we would kill them, and then we would plant the field no-till. And what that did is it delayed planting dates. It made the soil basically a monolithic. It made it smooth and like a normal no-till system. And it wasn't until we learned that if we planted it green, we got a much better balance of moisture in the soil. So if it was a wet spring, the ground was drier, and if it was a dry spring, the ground was wetter. When they're green, it's very hard to sleep at night when you plant that way because it looks so much different. So for that, it needs to be small scale. What we did was we had sprayed the headland on a field, and we got rained out, so we didn't spray the center of the field. It was completely by accident. It's been about 10 years ago. And what we noticed is when we went to plant it, we were planting into, I think it was a barley cover that was over about thigh high, and I think it was just about to head out, or it had headed out. And we found that when we planted the headlands, the soil was muddy. You know, we were getting sidewall compaction in the trench. The trench wasn't closing. You could see the seeds. It obviously wasn't fit to plant. But as we planted across the field, out of that headland into where it was green, the soil planted like a conventional field. So that told us that we could pull back our planting dates. We weren't focused on soil health at all. This was strictly how do we no-till but still get our same dates planted as we do with our conventional, because we're always in a hurry. We always want to be moving. So what that's allowed us to do is really kind of bring in a conventional. And then we noticed that the yields were better where we planted green than where we planted brown. So the yield gap that we always had between conventional and no-till has started to bridge to where we're equalizing our yields between our conventional and our no-till fields because they're green. I would recommend doing it on a small acre. Just do a 100-foot strip in a field. If you're spraying the whole field, you have it cover cropped, and you plan on no-tilling it, just leave 100 feet and try that experiment, because to me, we see it every year. We still see it where we have spray misses, or the guy missed something with the cover crop, or the airplane didn't get close enough to the edges, and every time, everyone on the farm that runs a planter really dislikes planting into a brown no-till field, and we're a very conventional farm, whether it's my father who's in his 70s or George who's in his 60s and has run a planter with us for 30 years. They all ask me, please don't burn any more cover crop off. Leave the fields green. And I'm like, well, I can't sleep because we can't scout. It takes, a lot of times it's 3 weeks before you can row the corn or row the beans.
So there's a give and take there. I mean, like you said, the planting in green, you really got to be patient until it's ready.
It's very tricky. I mean, there's a lot of nuance to it. It's not something that you can just... I'm still learning a lot every year.
Yeah.
This year we had an exceptionally wet spring, followed by a 30-day drought, followed by heavy rains. So kind of seeing that and kind of trying to figure it out. We're doing... I've got test plot work with the University of Maryland. I've got another scientist from USDA. I've got National Corn Grower Soil Health Partnership. So I've got multiple research things going on with water holding capacity, figuring out what's leaching through the soils, trying to learn it. So I think the more farmers that do it, the more we'll collectively learn, and I think there'll be guys a lot smarter than myself that'll figure out a lot of things that I can't figure out that'll actually help benefit me in the process.
All right, thanks, Trey. Okay, Jamie, back to the question again. So how can they start small and build the practices and use it clear across their operation?
You know, I think the first thing that a producer has to do is be open to change, right? You know, this isn't your grandfather's farm. You've got to be willing to look at something in a different light. The next thing I do is go out and talk to some people that have done something differently. You know, you can glean a lot of information from your neighbors, somebody that's taken a chance and done something differently. That might kind of spur some practices that you could possibly implement, or at least do a trial. And the last thing I do is take a look at programs. I mean, you know, there are incentives and programs out there that can make it more affordable to try something differently, to look at implementing a new practice or a new piece of machinery or equipment. Where there's program money, that's kind of an easy lift, to less risk, you know, to get that first initial return on investment. And for a lot of producers, I think that's a way that you can test the water. So look for those program dollars when they're available.
All right. Well, let's thank Jamie Walters and also Trey Hill for being with us here today. We hope that we've covered some of the sustainability practices that they're doing on their farm. Two unique farmers, and of course, it's all about the ROI, isn't it, guys?
It is.
All right. Thanks for being with us here on Facebook Live. I'm Pam Frutwell here in the Bear Tent at Farm Progress Show.